The Zalith Dominion Fleet, a sharp, angular collection of ships gleaming with alien technology, slipped quietly into Earth's orbit. They had expected a routine mission, a few scans of a forgotten world, and perhaps a relic or two to prove their dominance over the ancient myths of humanity. The Council had warned of Earth's mysterious silence, but in their youthful arrogance, the Zalith dismissed it as little more than superstition. No species in the galaxy could match their technology, and no one had dared to challenge their dominance in centuries. Earth would be no different. The first ship, the Leviathan, broke through the thick clouds, its hull reflecting the dim light of Sol's distant rays. The planet below was a patchwork of ruined cities and sprawling wilderness, the remains of what had once been a thriving civilization. The Zalith scientists stared out at the desolation with detached curiosity, unaware that the silence they observed was not the stillness of a dead world, but of something much older and far more dangerous. "We should have seen something by now," muttered Captain Drull, his voice echoing through the sterile bridge of the Leviathan. No signs of life, no signals, not even heat signatures from cities. This place is a graveyard. Ensign Tyra, a young and ambitious member of the crew, shifted nervously beside him. "It's almost too quiet, sir. The systems are showing some irregularities in the atmosphere. Maybe we should." "No," Drull interrupted, voice sharp. "We're going down. Earth holds no secrets for the mighty Zalith." The landing party prepared to descend. Their mission was to examine the ruins, search for human technology, and return with proof of their superiority. If they could unearth something from the past, perhaps a relic or a weapon, it would be another prize to flaunt in the face of the galaxy. The moment their boots touched Earth's soil, the temperature seemed to drop by several degrees. The air felt heavier, thick with an unsettling stillness, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Around them, the remnants of once great cities rose like broken bones, the skeletons of humanity's past civilization. Towering skyscrapers now shrouded in vines, roads cracked and reclaimed by nature. It looked like a world left to rot. "Fascinating," Tyra said, stepping forward, scanning the ruins with her handheld device. "There's nothing here, no signs of life, no energy sources. It's like they just vanished." Drull's eyes narrowed. "Focus. The mission is to collect data, not to waste time on useless speculation." As they walked deeper into the ruins, the oppressive silence grew, punctuated only by the sound of their footsteps on the crumbled streets. Yet something nagged at the back of Drull's mind. A strange feeling, like a cold weight pressing on his chest. Suddenly, there was a low hum that seemed to reverberate through the ground. The vibration sent a chill through the crew. It was subtle at first, but it grew louder, more insistent. Drull paused, his hand on the pulse rifle slung at his side. "Did you hear that?" Tyra whispered. Before anyone could respond, a sharp metallic screech echoed through the air, followed by a violent tremor. The ground cracked open in a jagged line, like the planet itself was waking from a long dormant sleep. They all staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief as the ruins around them seemed to shift. The hum intensified. Something was moving beneath their feet. The tremors subsided, but the uneasy feeling remained. The crew of the Leviathan stood frozen in the ruins of the ancient city, their eyes darting around, searching for the source of the disturbance. A silence, even heavier than before, had settled over them. The air felt thick, leaden with the weight of forgotten histories. Captain Drull adjusted his gauntlet and gave a sharp order. "Stay alert. Form up and move forward." He motioned for Tyra and the rest of the crew to follow. The landscape around them was surreal, a mixture of nature's slow reclaiming of what humanity had built and the devastation of a long-forgotten war. Buildings that had once touched the sky were now jagged remnants, their skeletal frames entwined with creeping vines and rusted metal. There were no signs of life, no wildlife, no movement. Even the birds, once so common, had vanished from the air. As they advanced deeper into the city, the unsettling hum that had rattled the ground earlier grew faint, but still audible, almost like a pulse under the earth. It was rhythmic, deliberate, and oddly familiar, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. "This isn't right," Tyra muttered, her voice low but tense. "No animal life, no signs of vegetation beyond what we're seeing. This isn't just abandonment. This is something else." Drawl waved her off. "You're overthinking it. Keep moving." But Tyra's unease lingered. Her scanner flickered erratically, and the data it was pulling in was inconsistent, almost as if the very sensors of the device were being interfered with by something unseen. She checked her readings again. "Sir, something's wrong with the equipment, I think." Before she could finish, a low, guttural growl pierced the silence. The sound came from behind them, somewhere deep within the labyrinth of ruins. It was unlike anything they had ever heard, raw, primal, filled with an intensity that sent a chill crawling up their spines. Drawl raised his weapon instinctively, his pulse quickening. What was that? The sound came again, louder this time, and this time it was accompanied by the unmistakable crunch of footsteps, footsteps that didn't belong to any of them. They weren't human, nor were they anything that Salif had encountered before. "We're not alone," Drawl said, his voice tight. He motioned for his team to fall into formation, weapons raised, but even as they prepared, the sense of being watched grew more suffocating. Something was waiting, observing them from the shadows, lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, Drawl caught a flicker of movement. A shape darted across the ruins, fast and fluid, disappearing before he could make out any details. His heart pounded harder in his chest. Whatever was out there, it was intelligent. It was hunting them. "We need to get back to the ship," Tyra said urgently. "Now." Drawl considered it for a moment, but the feeling of being trapped, of something closing in around them, stopped him. He could hear the sound of something. Someone, moving closer. The growls grew louder, more distinct. They were surrounded. He turned to his crew. "Stay together. Don't panic. We get to the ship, and we leave this planet behind. We don't know what we're dealing with here." But as he spoke, the ground beneath their feet rumbled once more, and a massive ancient doorway, hidden until now, creaked open with a deafening groan. Dark, narrow eyes glowed from within, watching, waiting. And then, without warning, the attack came. The moment the ancient door creaked open, a cold wave of air rushed out from the depths of the earth. The ground shuddered beneath their feet, and the growl, low, guttural, feral, rose to an almost deafening pitch. The crew of the Leviathan tensed, their weapons aimed at the dark abyss of the doorway. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, there was nothing but the oppressive silence. Then the eyes appeared. Two brilliant, amber orbs glowed from within the darkened archway, locked onto them with an intensity that froze their blood. They weren't human eyes, not entirely. There was something ancient, something otherworldly, within them, as though the being behind those eyes had watched the rise and fall of civilizations, long before the Xalith ever existed. It was a predator, and they were the prey. The figure that stepped into the dim light was no man. Its body was tall and lean, with skin that shimmered in the twilight, smooth and pale, almost translucent. The face was human, but distorted, twisted by the centuries it had spent in hiding. A strange symbiosis of biological and mechanical parts melded together, making it seem more machine than man. But its eyes, the eyes burned with a ferocity and clarity that spoke of ancient, forgotten rage. "You should not have come." The voice was deep, reverberating through the earth, like a storm churning deep below the surface. It was a sound not heard in millennia. Tyra's hand trembled on her weapon as she whispered, "What is that?" "It's one of them," Drawl said, his voice tight with disbelief. The legends, the whispers, the old tales about the Earthborn, humanity's final survivors, suddenly felt all too real. This was the nightmare the galaxy had avoided for centuries, and now they had awakened. Before anyone could react, the Earthborn moved, It was fast, too fast for any of them to track. In an instant, it was upon one of the soldiers, a flash of movement that left nothing but a scream. The soldier's body crumpled to the ground, his throat slashed open with such precision that he hadn't even had time to raise his weapon in defense. The others reacted instantly, firing into the darkness, their shots illuminating the cavernous ruins in brief flashes of light. But the Earthborn was no longer there. The only evidence of its movement was the severed limbs of their fallen comrade, scattered like broken dolls across the ground. "It's hunting us." Drell's voice was a growl, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Stay in formation. Don't let it pick us off one by one." But no sooner had he spoken than another soldier fell, his body crumpling to the earth with a sickening thud. The creature was everywhere, a blur of motion, striking without warning, faster than their enhanced reflexes could follow. The sound of its steps was silent, the only warning its faint, rhythmic pulse in the air, a heartbeat that reverberated in their chests. Tyra fired again, her eyes wide with panic. But each shot missed, the creature slipping through the shadows as if it were part of them. A ghost, a nightmare. "Get to the ship," Drell bellowed. "Now." They turned, running toward the clearing where the Leviathan was parked, but the Earthborn was already there, blocking their path. The last soldier who tried to run was lifted off the ground by some invisible force, his body contorted in midair before being slammed violently against the stone. It was no longer just a predator. It was something far worse, an unstoppable force, one that had been waiting for them, biding its time in the ruins of Earth. The Leviathan, their only hope of escape, stood at the edge of the city like a beacon of safety. Yet they knew, deep down, that even the might of their ship might not be enough to save them from the wrath of the Earthborn. Drell's breath came in ragged gasps, his mind racing. He had miscalculated. The Xalith had never faced anything like this before. And now, they were the ones being hunted. The terror of the moment sank deep into the hearts of the remaining Xalith soldiers. Their every step felt like it was being tracked, watched by unseen eyes. The ground beneath their boots trembled with every beat of that rhythmic pulse, and the air was thick with something ancient and malevolent. The hunt had begun. Drell forced his team into a tight formation, his mind racing. The Leviathan was their only hope of escape, but it was still several hundred meters away, through the dense ruins that seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every shadow in their path felt like a trap, every broken building an ambush waiting to spring. "We can't outrun it," Tyra said, her voice shaking. She was the most tech-savvy of the crew, but even her usually calm demeanor was breaking under the pressure. "It's too fast, too precise." "No choice," Drell growled, his voice a tight command. "We get to the ship, or we die here." But even as he spoke, the world around them shifted. The pulse, the heartbeat of the planet, grew louder. A tremor rattled the ground beneath their feet, and then, from the corner of his eye, Drell saw it. A blur of movement, impossibly fast, darting between the ruins like a shadow. The Earthborn were closing in again. Without warning, a soldier near the rear of their group screamed. The sound was sharp, filled with sheer terror. Drell spun, just in time to see the soldier crumple, his body lifted off the ground and hurled into the jagged remains of a collapsed building. The Earthborn's presence was everywhere, too quick to track, too strong to fight. It had learned them, studied them, and now it was picking them apart one by one. "They're taking us apart," Tyra whispered in horror, her breath ragged. "We're sitting ducks out here." Drell's eyes hardened. He couldn't allow fear to overtake him. "Stay focused. We move as one. Stay in the center of the group." They pressed on, but it wasn't long before the next attack came. This time, it was more than just the Earthborn itself. The ground beneath their feet cracked open, and out of the fissures, skeletal figures, twisted and deformed, began to emerge. These weren't just creatures. They were the remnants of humanity itself, Dead humans, reanimated, their bodies altered by the ancient technologies buried deep within the planet's crust. They moved with the same unnatural speed, their eyes glowing with the same amber fire as the Earthborn. Thrall cursed under his breath. They were right. Earth wasn't abandoned. It was a prison. The reanimated humans didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their actions were driven by an ancient primal hunger. The soldiers fired, but their weapons couldn't keep up with the sheer speed and ferocity of the creatures. Every shot seemed to miss, as though the world itself was conspiring to keep them from escaping. Tyra's gun jammed in the middle of a frantic reload, and she cried out in frustration. "Thrall, I can't." Before she could finish, one of the reanimated figures lunged at her. Its sharp claws scraped across her armor, but her instincts kicked in. She swung her rifle around, catching it across the face. The thing staggered, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The Earthborn's voice echoed in the distance, a low, mocking growl. Thrall reached out and grabbed her by the arm, yanking her to her feet. "Move. Now." They surged forward, leaving the wreckage of their fallen comrades behind. But every step they took, the Earthborn moved closer, its presence like a crushing weight. They could feel it now, in the very air, an inescapable force that had no intention of letting them escape. It had been watching them from the shadows, learning them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Leviathan was in sight now, the sleek craft standing like a silent sentinel amid the ruins. But even as they approached, the Earthborn's growl reverberated through the earth beneath them, and the ground split once more. More of the reanimated humans emerged, their faces twisted in silent screams. "Run!" Thrall shouted, but the Earthborn was already there. One by one, the soldiers were struck down, their bodies crumpling to the ground with terrifying precision. The Earthborn moved among them like a storm, its eyes locked onto Thrall. It was almost time for the final strike. The Leviathan loomed ahead like a distant dream, but it seemed farther with each passing second, swallowed by the chaos and the relentless pursuit of the Earthborn. Thrall's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. There were only 4 of them left, he, Tyra, and 2 other soldiers, both of whom were breathing heavily, their faces drawn with exhaustion. Their weapons were now little more than symbols of defiance. They weren't going to stop the Earthborn. "Get to the ship," Thrall shouted again, his voice harsh with desperation. He could feel the weight of the Earthborn's presence behind them, just beyond the edge of their vision. It was relentless, a force that knew no mercy, no pause. Tyra was limping now, her face pale, and one of the soldiers, Jurek, was holding his side, blood trickling through the seams of his armor. The reanimated Earthborn had not just torn through their ranks, they had crushed their spirits too. The Xalith had never been this vulnerable before. The ground beneath them quaked again, and Drael felt the unmistakable presence of something large moving beneath the earth. The hum of its power was felt as much as heard, vibrating through the very air around them. The Earthborn was close, too close. The remnants of the fallen, the reanimated soldiers, had vanished into the dark, only to return with terrifying speed, always in the shadows. They were the eyes of the Earthborn, a system of perfect surveillance. Thrall forced himself to ignore the mounting panic. They had made it this far. The Leviathan was their final refuge, their only hope. He would not let it be for nothing. "We're almost there," he yelled. His pulse was a drumbeat in his ears, his muscles screaming for relief. But then, the ground gave way beneath them. A chasm, wide and deep, opened up, splitting the road in front of them. Thrall barely had time to react before the soldier to his left, Roan, was swallowed by the earth, his scream echoing through the ruins as he vanished into the darkness below. "Roan," Jurek screamed, but it was no use. The Earthborn had set a trap, and they had walked right into it. "We don't have time," Thrall barked. He turned and grabbed Tyra by the arm. "Move." But the Earthborn had made its move. From the chasm, a massive, hulking figure emerged. Its form was a blur of muscle and shadow, towering above them like a living mountain. It was the Earthborn, no longer hidden in the shadows but fully revealed, a creature of primal force and ancient wrath. Its eyes, burning with that amber light, were locked onto them, its gaze a death sentence. The remaining Xalith soldiers raised their weapons, but it was clear that they were no match for this monstrous being. Their blasters, even their strongest energy weapons, would do little more than annoy it. This creature wasn't a simple predator. It was a force of nature, a living embodiment of the Earth's fury, its anger. Tyra raised her gun, hands trembling, but Drael slapped it down. No, it's too strong. Run. There was no other choice. Their survival depended on reaching the Leviathan, if they could even make it there. The Earthborn bellowed, a low, resounding roar that seemed to shake the very atmosphere. With a single, fluid motion, it leaped from the chasm, its claws slashing the air as it landed with the force of a meteor, sending a shockwave rippling through the ruins. Drael didn't wait. He pulled Tyra toward the Leviathan, his heart hammering as the Earthborn gave chase. Every step they took was one step closer to death. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the barest chance to escape, to live, to return to their fleet with something, anything, to show for this catastrophic mission. As they neared the ship's hatch hissed open, but the Earthborn was not far behind. Its roar grew louder, a promise of the destruction it would bring. Drael pushed Tyra up the ramp, his hand reaching for the controls as he screamed into the comms. "Launch," he bellowed. "Now." But even as the Leviathan began to lift off, the Earthborn reached the ship's exterior, claws scraping against its hull. It was a nightmare in motion, a creature that was not content to let them escape so easily. "Engage thrusters. Full speed." Drael ordered, his mind a whirlwind of action, but it was clear. This fight wasn't over. Not yet. The Earthborn had tasted their fear, and it wouldn't let them leave until it had made them pay for their intrusion. As the Leviathan shot up into the sky, breaking free of Earth's atmosphere, Drael looked back toward the ruined planet below. His heart still pounded in his chest, but for the first time in hours, he allowed himself a breath of relief. They had escaped, but only just. The Earthborn were still there, and they would not forget. The Leviathan surged upward, its engines firing with the intensity of a storm. The ship tore through the atmosphere, leaving behind the fractured ruins of Earth. For a brief moment, there was only the deafening roar of the engines and the hum of the ship's systems. Drael leaned back in his seat, his hand still gripping the controls, his heart racing from the terror of the past few hours. The terror wasn't over yet, though. Not by a long shot. As they breached the upper atmosphere, the planet below began to shrink, its jagged landscape slowly fading into the distance. But the weight of what they had just survived, what they had witnessed on the surface, pressed heavily on Drael's chest. The Earthborn had not only proven themselves as hunters, they had shown that they were an ancient force, something that the galaxy had long forgotten. No matter how advanced the Xalith were, no matter how mighty their technology, they were utterly powerless in the face of such an adversary. Tyra stumbled into the cockpit, still pale from the horror she had witnessed. Her breathing was shallow, and her hands trembled as she gripped the seat behind Drael. "Captain," she said, her voice quiet but urgent. "We're not safe." "Not yet." Drael's eyes flicked over to the display, watching the planet grow smaller as they moved away. His hand hovered over the comms, but he hesitated. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear the fear in the voices of the rest of the crew, the ones who hadn't made it off the planet, but it was part of the duty. "Captain, we need to report back," Tyra repeated. "The fleet needs to know what's down there. They need to know the Earthborn are real." Drael nodded, his mind still racing. It had been a brutal fight for survival, and they had barely made it out alive. He could still feel the Earthborn's amber gaze burning into him even now. That relentless pursuit. "We'll send a report," he said finally, his voice strained. "But the fleet won't believe us. No one will believe us." Tyra's eyes narrowed. They have to. If we don't, they'll never know what's coming. Drawl let out a sharp exhale and activated the comms, sending a distress signal to the nearest Salif outpost. The transmission went out, but it was as much a formality as anything. The message would take weeks to reach its destination. By then, the Earthborn would have had time to prepare. Earth might have already become a war zone. As the ship drifted farther from the planet, something in the back of Drawl's mind nodded him. Something wasn't right. The Earthborn were not the only force out there. Their technology, their relentless hunger, it felt older than even the Zalith could comprehend. There was something beneath that planet's surface, something waiting for them to leave, to let their guard down. "Captain," Tyra said again, drawing his attention. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Drawl met her eyes. "What?" "The other presence," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The one we couldn't see. The one we could feel, even in the air. It was like a shadow hanging over us. It wasn't just the Earthborn." Drawl's stomach churned. He hadn't said anything, but he had felt it too. The oppressive weight of something watching, something ancient. But that presence, that overwhelming sense of being observed, had never fully left him. "I don't know what it was," Drawl muttered, "but I felt it." Tyra shuddered. "We're not done with Earth, Captain. Not by a long shot. And neither is whatever that thing was." Drawl gripped the controls tighter, the weight of their escape crashing down on him. The Earthborn had been merely the beginning. Whatever else lurked beneath the surface of that forsaken world was far worse. As the Leviathan broke free of Earth's orbit, the distant stars beyond seemed like the only escape. But even out in the cold void of space, Drawl could feel it. The eyes of the Earthborn, watching them, and something else, something older, waiting to reclaim what had once been its domain. They had survived the hunt, but they had no idea what the future held. The Leviathan drifted through the cold expanse of space, the distant stars now a bitter reminder of what they had left behind. The crew sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, their minds haunted by the horrors they'd witnessed on Earth. The ship was a sanctuary of sorts, but even its reinforced hull couldn't protect them from the weight of their failure. Earth was lost, and they were the last to know. Drawl stared at the view screen, his eyes bloodshot, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline. He had barely slept in days, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw the amber glow of the Earthborn's eyes, searing through the darkness. The roar of the creatures reverberated in his mind like a drumbeat that refused to quiet. They were being hunted by something far older than them, something that had been biding its time, waiting for its moment to strike. Tyra approached quietly from behind, her footsteps barely making a sound on the metal floor. She had been quiet ever since they left Earth, her eyes distant. Drawl could see the same fear in her expression, the same unease gnawing at her. "We're clear of the planet," Tyra said softly, her voice almost a whisper, "but I still don't feel safe." Drawl didn't answer immediately. Instead, he shifted in his seat, focusing on the blinking redouts in front of him. The message they had sent to the fleet still hadn't been acknowledged, and the silence on their comms was deafening. "We've had contact before," Tyra pressed. "From the fleet, even if it's just an automated reply. We should have heard something by now." Drawl nodded grimly, his jaw tightening. He knew what she was implying. The fleet wasn't just ignoring them. They were avoiding them. It was a chilling thought, one that gnawed at the back of his mind. "You're right," Drawl said finally. "I don't trust the silence either. But until we can get in range of the nearest outpost, all we can do is wait." Tyra walked over to the console, scanning the distant stars for signs of any communication, any sign that they weren't alone. "You think they already know what we found?" she asked, her voice low. That there's something else out there. Something older than the Earthborn." Drawl's mind drifted back to Earth. The presence, the shadow. It had been a subtle thing, but unmistakable. Something beneath the Earthborn, something that moved with purpose, guiding them, controlling them. The Earthborn were too primal, too savage, to be the true threat. Whatever had created them, whatever had waited in the depths, was the true enemy. "I don't know," Thrall replied, his voice strained. "But I feel it. It's like it's been watching us all along. Like it's waiting for something." Tyra's eyes narrowed. Waiting for what? Thrall's gut twisted. For us to leave. To think we've escaped. To think we're safe. The words hung in the air, thick with a terror neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Thrall's hand clenched into a fist. It knows we're coming. It knows we're still alive. Tyra took a step back, her face pale. Then what the hell are we supposed to do? If we can't even make it to the fleet without being hunted, then we have to find out what it is, Tyra, Thrall said, cutting her off. "We have to go back." Tyra stared at him, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "You can't be serious. You want to go back to Earth? After everything that happened?" "We don't have a choice," Thrall replied, the weight of his words settling heavily between them. "We don't even know if the fleet will listen to us. And if we don't figure out what we're up against, we'll never be able to stop it. This isn't just about Earth anymore. It's about the entire galaxy." He turned to face her fully, his gaze hardening. The Earthborn were just the beginning. And whatever else is down there, whatever it is that's waiting, it's not going to stop with Earth. Tyra swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the controls, then back to Thrall. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. She didn't want to go back, but deep down, she knew he was right. "We go back," she said finally, her voice steady despite the fear lingering in her words. "But we need a plan. We need to know exactly what we're walking into this time." Thrall nodded, his resolve hardening. "I'll make the calculations. We can't afford to be reckless." As the Leviathan drifted further from Earth, the shadow of the unknown stretched behind them, and the distant stars ahead seemed colder, more distant than ever. Whatever they had faced on that cursed planet was far from over. And the true battle had only just begun. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The Leviathan drifted in the cold void, its engines idling as Thrall set course for Earth. The stars outside seemed distant, indifferent. As the ship's instruments hummed softly, Thrall couldn't shake the feeling of inevitability, of something watching, waiting for them to come back. The Earthborn had been a mere fragment of the horror that awaited them. Tyra sat at a console, her fingers tapping nervously against the interface, her gaze flickering back to Thrall occasionally. The silence between them was thick, almost oppressive, but it was the kind of silence that only the calm before a storm could bring. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" Tyra's voice broke the stillness. Her tone wasn't one of doubt, but of the shared understanding that what they were about to do was beyond dangerous. Thrall didn't look away from the control panel. He had already run the calculations a dozen times, checking every route, every possible scenario. He was a leader, but even he couldn't predict how this would end. Yet something deep within him told him that if they didn't return, if they didn't uncover what lay beneath the Earthborn's power, they would never be safe. "We don't have a choice, Tyra," he said, his voice unwavering. "The fleet's not going to believe us. No one will understand the threat unless we show them what's down there. If we let this thing go on, it'll spread, and the whole galaxy will be in its grip." Tyra exhaled slowly. "So we're going back into the heart of it all. Into that place. The Leviathan is all we have." Thrall turned to her then, locking eyes with her. "It's not just about the Leviathan anymore. It's about everything we've seen, what we've survived, and what we still have to stop." The seconds stretched into minutes as the ship accelerated toward Earth's orbit. The planet below was a distant, murky orb now, familiar, yet terrifying. The scars from their earlier escape still haunted the view, and Thrall knew that nothing they had seen or felt would be gone when they landed. It was waiting just beneath the surface. "Captain," Tyra began again, her voice tense, "are we going to be able to defend ourselves this time?" The Earthborn. They were fast. They were lethal. What if we can't handle it? We're not just fighting the Earthborn this time, Thrall replied, his grip tightening on the controls. There's something else, something older. It wasn't just the creatures that were watching us. There's more to this planet than we understand. Whatever's down there, whatever ancient force is pulling the strings, it's the real enemy. The ship began to shake slightly as they entered Earth's atmosphere. The turbulence was minimal, but it was enough to make Thrall's nerves flare. His fingers flew over the controls, adjusting their descent path. He knew Earth had become a battleground, and now they were returning to face whatever had claimed it. Tyra sat up straighter, her hand gripping the console in front of her. We're not going in unprepared, right? Thrall glanced at her, his eyes steely. We have the ship, we have each other, and we have to take whatever we can to the surface. Weapons, gear, anything that can help us survive. Once we land, we won't have long before the Earthborn come for us again. A sudden blip on the radar cut through their conversation. A warning signal, faint but growing stronger. Thrall's pulse quickened. It's them. The Earthborn were not far behind. We need to land now, Thrall barked, his voice low but commanding. We don't have the luxury of time. Tyra's hands moved swiftly, adjusting the ship's landing trajectory as the red warning lights flashed in the cockpit. Below, Earth awaited, but now it was not a symbol of home or hope. It was a place of darkness, of death. They were not returning as conquerors or survivors. They were returning to face the unknown. The Leviathan descended swiftly toward the ravaged planet, the distant landscape below a jagged silhouette against the burning sky. Earth's surface had changed since their last escape. Destruction had spread like wildfire, deep scars cutting through the land. As they neared the ground, the ship's sensors pinged with an alarming frequency. The Earthborn were near, lurking in the shadows. The hunt was already on. Brace for impact, Thrall ordered. We land, and we move fast. The moment we step onto that surface, there's no turning back. With a sharp jolt, the Leviathan touched down, the ground beneath them shaking as they made contact. A hatch opened with a hiss, revealing the chaos of Earth's wasteland. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of decay and ruin. The Earthborn were watching, and they had come back to claim what was theirs.